I came across a couple of images that I shot a long time ago. And I'm sure you all have files that you shot whenever. Let's hit I, we can see. Yeah, this was, look, May 3rd, 2003, this was shot. So this is almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago. So what, and also, oh, by the way, look at it's a JPEG. Do you guys remember 20 years ago? Was anybody shooting RAW 20 years ago? This is before Adobe Lightroom. Adobe Lightroom is really what created the need for going back to RAW because it made RAW processing simple. Prior to this, dealing with RAW files was a pain in the derriere. And I, for one, I was just starting, this is really the infancy of digital photography. I was just starting, and you can see from the resolution of the file, 3x4. This is a 12 megapixel camera. So this is a very interesting place in Utah. Just if you've ever been to Page, Arizona, where the slot canyons are, the antelope canyons are, this is a little bit north of there, in an area called Perea. And there's these things called the toadstools, and they're all over the place. And that's kind of what these are. And there's all kinds of different shapes of them. And I was wondering, gee, what can I do to an image that's almost 20 years old compared to what I could do then? So let's take a look. So what are the issues? Well, color, we've lost color. Shadows are too deep. Well, so let's deal with that. Let's bring the shadows up, bring the highlights down a little. Let's add some warmth and saturation. That was a little too much saturation. Something about like that is what they look like. We need to bring up the shadows a little bit more. And in this case, strangely enough, I think the shadows have got a little too yellow compared to the rest of the image. So we'll fix that separately. And we've got this great sky up here that needs some life put back into it. So let's go ahead and select the sky. All right, so here's our sky selected. What's wrong? Well, it's a little too dark, but it's also doesn't have any definition. You can see there's great clouds in here. So we're going to use dehaze for that. That'll bring, oh, look at that. There was color there. It's a little too purple for my liking, which means you have to add green to the sky. Again, it sounds weird, but when you've got some purple in your sky, that will neutralize it. We could add a little bit more blue to it. And in this case, I'm actually going to bring the saturation down a little bit. I want the drama of it, but I don't want it to look supernatural. Looks great. Now let's get a brush. You guys remember brush keyboard shortcut? K, right? K. Let's hit K. Auto mask on, and let's select these deep shadow areas. Oh, my flow is still down. Let's bring the flow back up to 100. Let's get some of these deep shadows. And I'm just running around here and clicking on these shadow areas rather than dragging. I can drag too, but like this one, I don't want this one to get affected quite as much. So that light spot we're going to leave alone. I just want to get the dark areas opened up a bit. All right, so let's bring the exposure up there. Open up those shadows, and that looks awesome. I am going to add a little bit of blue to them though. I'm going to take a little bit of the warmth again to add a little dimension, because going from warm to cool will add some dimension as well. And now I think as I look at the entire image, we're going to add some clarity in, and we'll add a little more dehaze. That made the sky a little bit too dramatic. We'll back that off later. We can just go back to our mask that we already selected. Now let's take a look at this image. What's going on here? We want to feature these odd things, these toadstools, these pillars with rocks sitting on top. And this happens naturally. It's not something that people are going out and doing. What I found really interesting here is there are two faces in this image that are quite prominent. One is there's this creature coming up out of the ground that looks like it has a face. And then also, as we come up here, look at this. There's another face in here, which I find fascinating. So let's actually make them faces. So let's get K, our brush again. I've got auto mask. Let's do a little auto mask. I'm going to select this guy in here. Whoops. I'm going to select this guy in here and let's have some fun. Let's open it up a little bit, bring up the exposure just a little bit so that he starts to show up a little bit more. You'll have to look for him. And this guy here, we'll hit done and hit K again. You know, he looks like some kind of creature, like one of those Ghostbuster things. I'm going to select the eyes and the mouth, and I'm going to darken them just a little enough to bring out, I'll do a little bit with dehaze as well, just to bring out the eyes and what looks like a mouth there. And it's starting to look more like a creature coming up out of the ground. Oh, is that a face there too? Oh, son of a gun. I think it is. There's a face coming out, not that quite that dark. Let's bring down the flow. In fact, let's zoom in on that. Let's go to 50%. There's almost like another face hiding in here. Let's make it a face. This one's got a nose. It's like some poor schmuck is buried in there. So again, to get us to the main subjects, these formations here, what's the problem? Well, we have this really bright wall up here. That's a distraction. It's a great wall, but we don't want the light part of the wall to be leading us out of the image. So let's hit K again. We've got auto mask on. I'm going to go ahead and turn the flow back up, and I'm going to select the right side of this wall. And let's bring down the exposure just a touch, and then we'll bring the highlights down just to darken that up. So now we can do some painting to get you to our subject. So K again. And now let's get our stars. Look at this pillar here. And this one back here. It's okay that we get stuff around it. We'll get our goblin coming up out of the ground. This poor guy who's buried in stone. And let's make a smaller brush and help everybody get to there to look at that little face hidden in the wall. As I'm looking at some of these plants and rocks in the front are maybe a little too dark, so we can bring those up as well. And actually, I think, yeah, these back here, they're just a little too dark. They need a little bit more light on them. Let's bring them up as well. And we'll even do there. And let's bring up the exposure on those. Ah, there we go. Now they're getting lit up. And I mean, it looks like a place from another planet. And look at the faces. Tell me that doesn't look like a face of some guy stuck in the dirt there. And I love this grinning one with the teeth here. So that looks awesome. Let's go back to let's hit done on that. Let's go back to our masks and let's get the sky again, which is mask 1. So there's our sky. Let's select that and let's open up the exposure a little bit more. That's really what it needed. Didn't want it to be so dramatic that it took you away from the foreground. And I think as far as our final crop goes, I think maybe we want just a little less sky because it is dramatic. So let's hit Command apostrophe. I want to have a copy of this. And I think I want to make this a little taller and a little shorter at the same time. So let's hit R. I'm going to bring down the sky. As much as I like the sky, I don't want it to become the focal point of the image. There is another toadstool here, but we didn't get enough of it. So I'm going to cut in from the left a little bit to really focus us on the rest of the image. So we've got our primary toadstool here, our goblin coming up out of the ground, the poor guy in here, and then our face there. And pretty cool. We can add a little bit more directional light to the entire image. Let's go ahead and do our vignette first. I'm just going to use the standard vignette and Shift M. If you remember, Shift M is our radial. So I'm just going to create a radial. This is going to be a subliminal light path. Move it into the middle. I've got my bend right there by bringing our cursor outside of that dot. Let's make this a little bit wider this way. And I'm just going to bring up the exposure there just a little bit, just to really get you there. And hit done. And I think that looks pretty awesome. I'm going to go back to our original and reset that so you can see where we've gone. So here's the original raw file. Again, I mentioned I'm writing about this in this Friday's newsletter. All of our skills and the software skills and the software capabilities have changed. They've gotten so much more polished, so much more powerful than where we were 20 years ago. And I'm sure you all have images from back then that really deserve another look. Look at the ones that have a potential for a revisit, because there's good compositions there waiting. And as soon as I came across this and I saw the shapes and the faces, I thought, I've got to work on this. And when we just took it from there to there. Look at the difference. Look at the faces. Look at the toadstools. It looks like another planet. And it's just so cool that I'm going to have to print this. When you consider that this is what I had been looking at 20 years ago. And thanks to the current iteration of Lightroom, was able to get some really cool stuff going on in this image. So our points of view have changed. Our knowledge of composition and light and color has changed. And being able to create a story or a portrait of a place has been greatly enhanced by the capabilities of new softwares. So hope you enjoyed that. If you ever find yourself near Page, Arizona, this is maybe, half an hour northwest of Page as you cross into Utah. And it's just the most spectacular place. I haven't done a workshop here in some years. I'm probably going to do one early spring next year. I don't have time for it this year, but it's time to go back here because everybody goes to Antelope Slot Canyons, which have become like New York City subway during rush hour. It's an unpleasant experience, but there's so much other stuff around here, much of it that people don't know about. This is one of those places. So we'll see about doing that.